Grace and peace to you in the name of God the Creator, Christ the Redeemer, and the Spirit who sustains us. Amen. So here you are again, stopped in traffic. While waiting for the light to change, you look up and realize the same car is in front of you, the one with all the bumper stickers. Today, a different one catches your eye. This one reads, "Everything happens for a reason." And just then, "Turn, Turn, Turn" by the Byrds comes on the radio. You start singing along and then you wonder, is this really what the writer of Ecclesiastes meant, that everything happens for a reason? What do people mean when they say that? For people of faith, it's meant to imply that loving Jesus is the reason that good things happen in our lives. Let's sit with this for a minute, thinking about whether this is true. After all, everything happens for a reason is a pretty ambiguous statement. Along with police officers, firefighters, and EMTs, people who work in healthcare are probably among those who witness the most tragedy in other people's lives. And while I can't speak for any of the other professions, I can tell you that everything happens for a reason is right up there with God needed another angel in terms of healthcare workers' least favorite phrases. It tends to be said during times of suffering, like a new diagnosis or news that a particularly invasive or risky surgery is needed, or the death of someone who's been sick for a while or who was gravely injured. And it's meant to be comforting. But from a healthcare perspective, the reason, if you want to call it that, is most likely due to genetic predispositions or environmental factors or the sheer misfortune to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And sometimes there's no discernible reason at all. I cannot and do not believe that God gives people cancer or causes car accidents. Some people say it when something good happens, then it's meant to be affirming, but I don't know that it is. Have you ever heard this as an affirmation? Maybe when you got a promotion at work, when a child who struggled all the way through school receives their high school diploma, when after years of being alone, you fall in love with the person who will become your spouse. When people say everything happens for a reason when something good happens, this too implies that all the good things in our lives come from Jesus. But there's a strong argument to be made that promotions, graduations, maybe even falling in love happen due to discernment, hard work, and perseverance. Taking the time to learn the expectations, yours as well as other people's, and how they fit together, and whether you are willing to commit to meeting them. But promotions and graduations aren't miracles. Falling in love is a miracle in many ways, but staying in love requires commitment and shared values. So to say that everything happens for a reason is to write off all of the things you have done to get to that point as unimportant. Now you may be thinking, Pastor Sarah, last week you stood there and told us that God helps those who help themselves is not true, and that everything we have comes from God. Now it sounds like you're saying exactly the opposite. I had not planned my sermon content or outlines when I chose to juxtapose God helps those who help themselves with everything happens for a reason. I don't think that far ahead. But I do think it offers a nice illustration of dualistic thinking, the notion that the world is made up of binary choices, black or white, good or bad, right or wrong, hot or cold. And the notion that everything happens for a reason is also an example of dualistic thinking. It implies that good things happen to good people, and bad things happen to bad people, even if we can't see it. Somehow, some way, in this way of thinking, there must be some blessing, some silver lining in the tragedies of life, whether they are great, life-altering tragedies or small, momentary ones. Last week, we ended at the font. We ended with baptism, the gift of faith that God gives us, which we cannot give ourselves. No more and no less. And that's no small gift. That gift is everything. It is life itself. But that does not mean that we don't get to make decisions about our lives. That does not mean we can't work hard and strive for things. We can. Those decisions can and should be impacted by our faith in Jesus, just like everything else in our lives. But Jesus is not the one who grants promotions. Jesus is not the one who makes career choices or chooses who we should marry. Jesus is not the direct cause of the good things in our lives any more than the bad. A minute ago, I mentioned the idea of dualistic thinking because we have a hard time not thinking dualistically. We can come to this morning's text with that mindset. Listen again to a fragment of the text and really pay attention to where your thoughts take you with each pair of words. A season to be born and a season to die. A season to plant and a season to harvest. A season to hurt and a season to heal. A season to tear down and a season to build up. A season to cry and a season to laugh. A season to mourn and a season to dance. As I said, dualistic thinking is governed by the idea of either or, two things set in opposition to each other, compared to each other. And then, once we compare two opposites to each other, the next step is to assign value. Which is better, to be born or to die, to hurt or to heal, to tear down or to build up, to cry or to laugh. This text can be read through the lens that we don't have control over our lives, that God determines when we will be born and when we will die, when we will be hurt and when we will heal, etc. And that would certainly fall into this idea of dualistic thinking. Something along the lines of, if I try to go my own way, that's bad. But what God ordains for my life is good. Or, out of the bad, the good will come. But are all of these things bad? Or are they just things, events, actions? Here might be a more useful way to think about this poem in Ecclesiastes. Everything will happen sometime. There are only two things on this list that the writers seem to think were completely out of our hands. We might be able to hear it differently if we take away the symmetry. A season to be born, a season to plant, a season to hurt, a season to tear down, a season to cry, a season to heal, a season to build up, a season to laugh, a season to harvest, a season to die. All of them, except for being born and dying, involve choices. They involve actions on our part. And when we move away from dualistic thinking, we stop seeing them as good versus bad. We cannot harvest if we haven't planted. Sometimes we need to tear something down so we can build something else up. It is good to mourn when we have lost someone we love, and it is also good to emerge from a period of mourning and celebrate the things that bring us joy. To say everything happens for a reason can lock us into a narrow perspective. one that tries to keep us from crying or mourning. It can limit us to viewing creation and all that is in it from our own perspectives without realizing it. If I say to someone who is mourning, everything happens for a reason, I may really believe that I can see good that will come from this time of grief, but at the same time, I'm denying their right to mourn and telling them to hurry up and dance already. And by the same token, when I congratulate someone who accomplished something wonderful by saying everything happens for a reason, I'm tearing them down during a season when I should be building them up. So what do we gain from all this, the writer asks? What does it matter that we learn when to plant and when to mourn, when to laugh and when to throw away? In answer to their own question, the writer tells us God has made everything in harmony with the divine. Yet although the Almighty has imbued eternity into our soul, we are unable to grasp the totality of God's work from beginning to end. What I do know is that what is best for us is to be happy and enjoy life as long as we live. In other words, if we are wise, we will see the beauty of God's creation, but also understand that there are limits to our understanding. We will never see the whole picture. The best we can do is make decisions that lead us to be happy and in harmony with creation, and in which we find fulfillment. Sometimes we shape the course of events in our lives, and sometimes there are external forces that we don't understand and may not even see at work. But through all of it, God desires to be in harmony with us and for us to be in harmony with all of creation in seasons of sorrow and in seasons of joy. Amen.